I'm Jennifer Bilbrey, and this is On Our Minds, a podcast and blog about psychotherapy in Austin, Texas. Today I'm interviewing Katrina Taylor, and she's a psychotherapist here in Austin, and she specializes in trauma. So we're going to talk about what does trauma mean and how she sees it, how she works with it in her clients, and with the couples she sees. So hi Katrina.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with that word trauma. We were just talking a minute ago about what that means and how for some people, when they hear it, it can feel very scary. And so, just talk about what you think the word means and how you talk to clients about that word.
Sure. Well, I agree. I think for a lot of people, the word trauma can seem like something scary.
Right.
And that may not necessarily apply to them.
Yeah.
But really, it's the experience and the subjective experience, because we're all different and we all experience events in our lives and the world differently. But it's really the subjective experience of an event or something happening that overwhelms our capacity to be able to handle it, to be able to tolerate it.
Okay.
So that basically there's too much feeling for us to be able to tolerate. Too much fear, for example, is a common one that leads to trauma.
And when you say, Katrina, that we can't tolerate it, what do you mean?
Well,
like it's that subjective
it's a
feeling
subjective
that I
experience of, sort of whatever's happening right now, the activation in my body, kind of how I feel emotionally about this. It just overwhelms my normal capacity to tolerate what is happening in life and kind of the daily events of life.
Okay.
So one example would be, being in a hurricane, in a natural disaster. That for a lot of people,
a lot of that in the news.
Yeah, it's in the news lately, and for a lot of people, just the fear, the helplessness, the experience of being in something that we can't control is, to some extent, likely to overwhelm our capacity to be able to handle it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I think one of the important things I hear you saying is that there is a difference between that for you trauma is more subjective than objective, and that for others in the field there might be like an objective way to define trauma for all of us, but that for you it's more about what is that client's specific experience, and do they feel they can handle it.
What is that client-specific experience? And I think as we're talking about it, the other piece that comes into play is often our capacity to handle something is based on how much support and how many resources we have.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So someone, with maybe a good social network and resources in terms of finances, of being able to go and stay at a safe place, is likely to have fewer adverse effects, than someone who they lose everything and they may not have a place to go. And they may feel very overwhelmed with fear, with helplessness, with uncertainty. Yeah. And so that person, their subjective experience is likely to be more adverse.
Yeah. And that applies to a range of experiences in life, not just a hurricane, but like divorce or death or... Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, okay. And I think now we're kind of getting into the difference between something like a single incident trauma, right? Something like a hurricane or being in a car accident or another natural disaster, versus something that happens in a relationship. And maybe particularly, a lot of what we work with in therapy is childhood trauma, developmental trauma that happens in the context of the caregiver relationship, of the family dynamics, and generally those events are repeated. So we really see those as more complex kind of traumas because they don't just happen once, but they happen over and over and over again, and they're generally perpetrated by someone who the child, should be able to trust, and who should be able to help the child. Okay. But it doesn't work out that way.
What I like about the language you're using to describe trauma is that it's not like there's really awful trauma and then there's okay trauma.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be easy, at least for me when we talk about it, to like have a hierarchy in my head of trauma. And I just like the language you're using, because because it's just so true with clients, with people, that this thing that might seem like pretty low trauma can be experienced in a really, internally in a very severe, intense way for people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you and I probably have both seen that clients will come to us with this hierarchy.
Right,
and
exactly.
They'll say,
especially, Katrina, I'm thinking of couples.
Yes.
Where one is like, well, that thing happened to me and that's not such a big deal, or right?
Right. They'll say, my life wasn't that bad. My parents were good enough. They put a roof over my head. They fed me. They went to, the soccer game.
Practices.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But maybe as we explore further, we come to find out that maybe the parents were belittling or yelling, and that can be just as traumatic as someone who maybe...
Or withholding affection.
Kind of neglectful, emotionally absent. And that can be just as traumatic and can have as many adverse effects as a child who was hit, physically abused. Yeah.
I totally agree that it's really, especially initially in therapy, it's one of those hurdles. It feels like, for me, like to have people be on the page of like, this is a big deal. This did happen to me, and I do need to look at it and think about it and not minimize it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you were mentioning the word trauma. And I don't know that we need to label everything as trauma for clients, but I think we can say, when your mother ridiculed you for seeking affection from her, for instance, how did that affect you? How do you feel about that as an adult? Do you have a sense of how that's affected your relationships?
Yeah.
So I think we can talk about these experiences without necessarily needing to label them.
That's a good point.
But more so helping people understand their subjective experience, their reality, kind of how those early experiences have gotten them to where they are in life and the things they're struggling with in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk more about that subjective experience, because when you say that, I think of the phrase mind-body connection. That we have to have, we have to have enough consciousness, enough awareness to know what's happening in our body. And that sounds simple, but it's actually like a skill, it seems to me. Like we can, you know what I mean? Like it seems like, shouldn't we know that my heart is racing, or that I feel like I want to hit you, or I feel like I need to flee the room. But a whole lot of people don't know that
it's so true.
That's what's happening in their body.
Yeah,
and that's one way that therapy can be helpful, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think for various reasons, cultural being one of them, that we live in a culture that values logic and rationality and sort of thinking with a clear mind, more so than connecting to our own body, own emotions. So that's one aspect, and another aspect is that for various reasons, we become disconnected from our own bodies. We protect ourselves from the knowledge that our body and our emotions hold. So for example, it may have been unsafe to know that you were angry as a child. So if you had the experience of my anger is going to be punished by my parents, I imagine that you and many of us would learn to shut down our anger. We would suppress it and we would say, no, I'm not angry. And it's impossible. It's too dangerous to allow myself to be angry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then as an adult in a relationship, you're going to get angry.
You're going to get angry. Right? Because we can't have relationships without anger.
Getting angry.
Yeah.
So it's super helpful to know, what does anger feel like in this body? How do I know when I'm angry? How do I know? Yeah.
To start to know, how does anger feel in my body? And also to start to understand, what are the habitual ways I've protected myself from being aware of my anger, right? That anger's got to go somewhere. So when I'm angry, do I kind of push it down, and then I start feeling, maybe physical symptoms of pain or tension, or sometimes clients will report having digestive problems, for instance, that can be related to, difficulty with their feelings. Or, does the anger get really turned inward, and do I start to attack myself and say there's something wrong with me for being angry, rather than telling the person I'm in a relationship with, hey, you did this thing and it made me angry.
Yeah. It's so funny because when we sit here and talk about it, it seems like, and sometimes when I'm in the room as a therapist, like the things coming out of my mouth seem like it's just the simplest thing in the world. Just like, tell your husband you're angry at him, But there are all these reasons why we learn not to, and why we can, and why it's not safe.
Yes, when you say that, maybe kind of on the surface how simple it sounds, right? But that as we work with people and as we do our own work, right, we realize, my goodness, how strong those protections and adaptations are, that we had to develop in order to survive our families. And to really honor, I think is a word I like, those protections, to really, kind of approach it with a sense of humility and understanding of, like, of course, it's so difficult to express anger, because of all of these reasons, that of course, that this is a natural adaptation to what was a very, unfriendly early environment.
Like, for instance, you're thinking if somebody shuts down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I would be very curious about, what's causing them to shut down right now?
Yeah.
How is shutting down an adaptive response right now? How is it helpful?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And how is it helpful in their family of origin to shut down and not express any emotion? How did that keep them safe, protected, help them survive? Yeah.
That conversation feels so helpful to me to do in the context of a couple, because then the other person hears it, It does seem like there's such a deeper level of compassion, or I don't know, between couples when I can hear why you shut down, you know?
Exactly.
How that's helpful for you.
Yes.
That you're not doing it to be an asshole, know? Which is what I think.
Right.
Of course, I think that. Yeah.
Of course, couples come in, and they blame each other. He's such an asshole. He's so cold and withholding. And when I want affection from him, he goes to this shutdown place.
Right.
And there are ways that, obviously that's hurtful, to the partner who's saying that. But I think there's a way they maybe see it more as an intent to hurt them. Rather than, can we really start to understand and develop empathy for how this was a really protective strategy for your partner, and how it's not so much that they're trying to be cold or critical or withholding right now, but that they're really trying to protect themselves. That very likely they're afraid, that there's fear.
So for me, that's an easier conversation to have when somebody is shutting down than when somebody lashes out.
Yeah.
Does that work that way for you, that it's harder to explain that when somebody lashes out, that it's actually really helpful? I don't know.
So I agree. I agree. I think maybe when people lash out, it can kind of trigger some of our own discomfort with that.
For sure.
Some of our own dysregulation of,
for sure,
this person's so angry and they're lashing out. And it may be more difficult to connect with someone who is more heightened emotionally, more dysregulated, to take the time to explain. But a phrase that I've begun using is, you're fighting for connection.
Oh,
Yeah,
I like
when they're lashing out, they're trying to communicate a message.
Sure.
They want to connect with their partner, and maybe the way they're going about it is not the most effective, but really the fight is for connection.
Yes. Yeah, I like that way of putting it.
Yeah.
I'm Jennifer Bilbrey, and this has been On Our Minds, a podcast and blog about psychotherapy in Austin, Texas. For more information or to see more episodes, please go to my website at jenniferbilbrey.com. Thank you.